We've told young people for decades, get good grades, get the scholarship, get the degree, and everything will work out. But what happens when you do everything right and still feel completely lost? There's something interesting about being high achieving early. You collect degrees, awards, and accolades, and then you enter the real world and realize success on paper doesn't automatically translate into authority when you're sitting in the room. Welcome to Deals with Heels. I'm your host, Deborah. Today's guest is Emily McSherry, CEO of Advise, a six-figure AI-powered career platform used by top universities. From a tiny Texas town with zero business role models to UCLA Anderson MBA to building mission-driven tech, Emily is redefining what early ambition can look like when paired with clarity and power. Welcome, Emily, to the show.
Thanks, Deborah. Excited to be here.
I am really excited to have you on the show. You remind me a bit of my younger self, but I wasn't as clear as you are. I wasn't able to really stand in my power, and it was quite a few decades ago as well. I'm Gen X, and I was raised in a generation and through the GATE program where we found our value through achievement. And so when you're young, that sometimes is easy. It was easy for me. I could work hard. If I worked, there was nothing I couldn't accomplish. All I had to do was work hard enough, whether it was sports or a test or some other achievement, there was always something to achieve. And so that value can really build. But often when we get into adulthood and we're out of college and we're building our business, those accolades and achievements don't come as easily. And it strikes us in a way that sometimes can cause real mindset issues later on in life. And I lived through all of those. And one thing I found really inspiring about you and your story is that you've taken that to another level. You had all of that early success, and really, when you felt lost, you found your clarity and moved forward in really big ways. And so I want to dive into that so other people can be as inspired by everything that you've done as I am. Tell me a little bit about what that felt like when you realized I've done all this stuff. Why do I still feel lost?
Yeah. And to your point, right, that's the age of, that's kind of how I was trained, right, from my parents, very similar mindset. And I think there can be a lot of truth to that. But I think what's, kind of echoing what you're saying, I think what's confusing about it for young people or anyone kind of growing up through the ranks is you're put in these systems to succeed and you can win those almost like an award or a prize. And then, like you're saying, when you get out, it's not really like that. You kind of start at the bottom again. And I think trying to put myself in my younger shoes, I felt like the harder I worked and the more I achieved and the more I accomplished, the more awards I got, the more prizes, etc. The it would correlate to success when I got out or became a professional, including making money, right? And then so I moved to LA, basically had no savings. I had a tiny, tiny bit of student debt, not much. And I kind of started at the bottom with other people that I knew did not do as much as I did. I knew did not work as hard as I did. It was not fun. Like, it was not great. It felt like a total, almost like collapse of your whole planning process, I would say, as you're growing up, right? You feel, because everyone wants to feel like they're moving forward and doing the right things to accomplish their dreams. And then when that's not how it works, it can almost feel like your life implodes a little bit. And people call that the quarter life crisis, I think, or can refer to that as the quarter life crisis at that age.
Well, I think that is great perspective because I didn't think of it in terms of, I probably would have when I was younger, in terms of boy, you can. If you work harder than the person next to you, you can achieve them. And there always seemed like a hierarchy. You could tell the people that didn't try as hard. It was easy to spot them and they didn't succeed as much. They can get all of those achievements and accolades. And then you get out into the business world and you're an employee and you're working and you're surrounded by people that don't care. They're apathetic about the company that they're working for. I call that the smoke. Smoke gets on everybody when you have it out there in a room. And so it can be very discouraging when you realize that. So after you realized, hey, this isn't what did you feel about that? What was the next steps?
Then I went on kind of like a self not research, self like discovery, I would
Mhm.
say. So back then, obviously there was some social media, but not maybe, the TikToks of the world didn't exist, but there was Instagram and stuff like that. I think Reddit was like kind of used. So I really just started Googling, how to figure out what you care about and how do you you know, set your own dreams and goals according to you to like, figure out who you are. And then I actually have the book on my desk here, but one of them was The 7 Habits of Stephen Covey. It's like a really old classic book came up.
Mhm.
And so I just started acquiring knowledge really as one thing. So talking about that, it helps you define your values and it goes through different exercises that help you think about critically like who you are and how you spend your time and like what success really means to you. So kind of philosophical stuff, I would say. A lot of mine and the things that I wanted were and still do want are tied to career. And I think there's really like two main areas that you're not really taught in school. And I've talked to many people about this and they typically agree with me. But one would be like really figuring out what career is right for you. Because the schools kind of care. They kind of don't, to be honest. They kind of just want to like, look the best, right? And at the end of the day, they are a business. And then the second would be like financial literacy. And both of those things typically add up to help you get things that you want. So those two areas became a really big area of self discovery. That's when I started also like talking to a lot of people through my work because I was in a recruitment industry or talent related industry where you interview people. I started acquiring knowledge from firsthand experiences of professionals, right? Like, why did you like this? What is this? What do you do? And then I started realizing, along with my coworkers in the same job, we were all like, oh man, if I knew this stuff before, I would have done a lot of things differently. So I'd say the next step was definitely a lot of just like self discovery, experimentation, and talking to people was next.
I love that you were able to do it, to look inward and find that about yourself. I definitely struggled with that. And I'm a completely different generation, but it was later in life when I had lost everything, right? My 5 kids I raised had left the nest, and my mom had passed away, and I took care of her, and my marriage fell apart. And it was really only then that I asked the question, what do I really want? And what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Because up until that point, it felt very much like the solution. I'm looking for this, like the fastest solution, especially when you have kids and all the financial things that happen. But what I really love about what you said was how academia academia is great at teaching us skills, teaching us philosophies and theories and all of the things from academics. But it often doesn't relate once we get into the real world because a lot of academic professors haven't been in the real business world. And even if you don't have a business degree, maybe you're a speech pathologist, but now you're going to start a business and nothing you learned about is going to help you understand how to do any of that. And that disconnect obviously spans across generations. It's disappointing, but it's also kind of reassuring in the sense that there's some younger people out there that are facilitating change, right? You took what you wished you would have had, what you learned from your early career in recruitment and created something new out of it that's being used and helped. And a very good friend of mine was in hospitality and he worked there for a few decades and then became executive in residence at a university. And having his real business world advice, and his students still call him to this day from then because he was their real world connection in that industry that they didn't really have any before that, and revamped that whole department. But you've created something that will kind of do that and help create those connections that didn't exist before. Tell us a little bit about why you created Advise.
Yeah, and to your point, I think it's also important to, I guess, for me to acknowledge, like, I think education's so important. And this isn't saying, they're not doing a good job. It's just there's still gaps and this stuff is really complicated. I mean, jobs change constantly. And how are you supposed to have anything that might resonate with every student at a 40,000 student population school that's unique to each person when the career teams, et cetera, are so small and the budgets are going down? Like, these people are in kind of tough scenarios, right? And so, really, the reason that we've created Advise is because jobs shouldn't be behind a black box, right? And so, really, the only thing that's existed so far right now that can really solve that problem, I would say, are like live interactions at scale. You might get a splash on social media or be able to do some research and, hear a couple people or read job descriptions. But at the end of the day, that's not the same as what we would do to go buy jeans online at Amazon and read some reviews and look at a video of people who actually put on the jeans. Do they fit? What did you like about it? How did you get here? Why do you want jeans? Right. And so we're basically doing that on video for careers, right? In the form of a digital coffee chat. Professionals like us can share our story in a way that's scalable. So, in 30 to 45 minutes, you can meet with one of our students who are paid interns who do interviews with the professionals. They ask a set of questions that are our standard and proven 13 interview questions, and each is turned into a short searchable clip. So each question and answer, like, Deborah, what do you like the most about being a podcast host? You answer, that becomes a short searchable video in our platform. So really, it's to scale this knowledge and access in a way that has never been available, and to make it easy while also giving the educators a tool that they can implement to make their lives a lot better, whether it's in the classroom or coaching session or advising session. And then I would say the last layer is we have a nonprofit side of the business that has committed to keeping a version of this free for any student, because it's even harder for underserved students if you're first generation, um, a Pell Grant recipient, et cetera. Those students have it that much harder. And so we don't want to cut it off from them.
And that was me, right? I was a scholarship and a grant student with a single mom and all the things. And it was scary. I can remember interviewing for big companies at the time, like Xerox, and which I don't even know if they're a company anymore, but used to, we didn't make copies. We made a Xerox because it was the standard. I think that is so amazing. And it's all in one place where they can find it and listen to it and understand it. There's a lot of challenges with podcast hosting. And for me, it's where my expert brand authority lives. But I didn't know that when I started my podcast. We didn't know what we didn't know. And I think that's kind of true for a lot of educators too. They don't know what they don't know because they haven't walked in those shoes out in the real world. They're doing their best to prepare. And I will tell you, college was life-changing for me. It really is where I developed who I am. And then from there grew from that. But there are so many things, so many classes that I remember to this day. And I'm 59. I graduated from college maybe before you were born, 1989. lots of great things. I learned so much while I was in college and then got out and realized I didn't know what I didn't know. And having this tool would have been incredibly valuable for me. And I'm sure it is for the people that are using it there too. I want to kind of change a little bit and talk about the isolation that being a capable young woman, high achieving, can really create, especially in corporate world. And I talk to people that are my age that are have escaped corporate world and they still have those feelings that it's so difficult to be that good and be a woman and a young woman at that and to be able to sit in that room. Can you tell us a little bit about your experiences in that?
Yeah. Yeah. And for a moment there, when I was around COVID times and before business school, I did get my life coaching certification and help specifically like young professionals kind of with this. A lot of them ended up being women, right? Because I just wanted to, I don't know, help through some of these things. And some of their problems were related to this, right? Like being the only woman on a large engineering team, um, etc. The first job I actually joined where I learned all this stuff was women owned. That was one of the things that I aspired to be. The CEO and the president were women. To be sitting next to them. And I thought that was really cool because I knew one of my goals someday would be to have my own business. And I kind of just thought the environment would be friendly in that way. It kind of spurs a couple ideas. I would say one thing that gives anybody confidence is experience. Right. So no matter if you're a woman, guy, whatever, I think you just gain more confidence the more action you take and the more experience you have in general. So if anyone's feeling like they don't have that, it might be because you haven't tried these things. And so you don't feel like you have an authority perspective, which might be true. And that's okay. So if that's you, go try stuff, go do stuff. If you already have that and you're still feeling not confident, then that's, I think, where acquiring the skills to communicate and stand up for yourself, that's like where I feel like a lot of women could fall in that bucket and feel isolated is maybe not owning your power a bit, which is still hard to do. But it is nice to look at facts of things that you have done to essentially like amp yourself up in those situations.
I'm all about
I would say that's
self-talk.
probably the biggest one. Yeah.
Self-talk. I often find also, and maybe younger generations won't have to deal with this, but I found that other women can be very hard. Women can be very hard on each other. We don't need men to be mean to us. Women are really hard on one another. And although, you know, I've had lots of guests on the show and we're all in the same place and all very supportive. And so I've seen tremendous growth in that arena. And I'm curious about when you sat next to those powerful women CEOs of, I mean, they're tough, obviously, and inspire toughness. But how was that?
Yeah, and you bring up a great point when it comes to relationships with men or women. I've had different experiences, right? And I think what the differentiator is how confident that woman is in herself, right? I tend to find that people perceive me as very confident, and I think that's true over time. But if I'm with someone who has their own insecurities and I'm just kind of like being myself, then sometimes that person feels like they might be in a corner and then they're not treating me well. I've had a boss a little bit like that who's probably worked her butt off to be where she is. She's talented, young, like kind of coming up, and maybe doesn't want to help as much, right? But
I
in this,
definitely experienced
yeah,
that.
that's a thing. That's a thing. I was happy to hear a while after I'd left, she actually acknowledged that that was something that she was working on to the other women on my team, which I thought was really cool. But that's one thing. And then that I have had the other experience where these CEOs, they're not intimidated by me. So they're very nice, very helpful, right? Uh,
Right.
and very
And great
encouraging.
leaders.
They would take, yeah, and they would take any of my calls. Like they would send every person in the company their cell phone number and like a Christmas photo, like very approachable. So I've kind of experienced this.
Yes, I have as well. And I'm happy to hear, though, that there's women out there doing big things and inspiring and mentoring younger women and have let go of that sort of defensiveness that likely was systemic, right? There weren't as many women in the room and sort of like, I'm going to be the top woman and I'm not going to be threatened or being defensive. So I like the way you put that. And I love that you've had both experiences because we're seeing growth. It took me a while to see the good side. I'll be honest. It was a lot of corporate America backbiting, and I excelled at corporate America because I'm very good at what I do. I was terrible at the politics of it and all of that behind the scenes thing. I'm a very honest and direct person. And so, because you seem to be that also, that often can not be taken in the way that we would like it to be.
Yeah, I'm sure it's easy for, it's hard to not get caught up in that stuff, especially if that's how the company operates. And some of the advice I would give to my coachees is I think you need to find allies, really, like whatever environment you're in, and make some friends, right? So you don't feel isolated. You meet
Yes,
people who kind of think the way that you do, and honestly, just buy them a coffee or lunch. And I think that goes a long way. And if you can't find any, then I think that's a problem.
I do too. And I think also making that circle the group that you want to aspire to be in. I think often we look for the closest place to acceptance, and that sometimes isn't looking forward, it's looking backwards. So I like that forward thinking leadership. And I definitely see it in you and in lots of the younger generations leaders in how they are stepping into power a little bit differently than my generation did. We had to claw for everything that we got, it felt like, and I know it feels like that for young women also. But I see a movement amongst younger women that is better than the way we were. They seem to band together and connect in ways that we find difficult once we get older and we've been more conditioned by society's expectations to be specific ways. What kind of leaders do you hope your generation becomes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always like the servant leader mentality, right? Or the referring to helping other people is kind of like a priority, right? That's a really key concept in like project management and leadership and things like that. I don't, you know, I don't like the dictatorship sort of mindset or run people over to make more money. Like, I just don't think that kind of stuff is good. I do think it can make people rich, unfortunately,
Not
right? And
everyone,
that's
though.
not everyone, but you gotta, like, shine and, like, push through if you're, like, doing good work and you're, like, a good person, like, those are the people that need to not quit, you know?
Exactly.
But easier said than done, right? Especially if it's not fast, because I think a lot of things that are fast seem great at first, but they're not, like, long lasting or, like, legacy determining and things like that, which I think is what we need.
I definitely believe in putting the human first. We are really in an era where it's hard to understand and feel what's true and what's not. There's a trust gap with so much in AI and all of the content being driven so fast, and it's hard to build that trust. And so that humanity part of it, and if you always look to serve that purpose and the actual humans around you, no matter the gender, then I think you're always going to land in the right place. And we see that a lot with companies laying off sometimes whole departments. Paycom is based here in Oklahoma City where I am, and they laid off about 1,000 people because of automation, really took those behind the scenes, number crunching, payroll processing type of jobs. And we had a friend that worked there and literally, and he's my age. I think he was the oldest person in the whole company, maybe. But his boss, who he really liked, was younger than him. But when all of that happened, the guy stood and read the note cards. There was no connection to the humans in the room, nothing to give them to help them build and be ready for those changes and how to adapt to rapidly changing technology that affects your work environment. So even if you're customer facing and you didn't face those layoffs, there are 750 people that aren't coming to work anymore where you work and people that you knew. And there's an impact on all of the people that work there. And there's sort of a disconnect where we're just meant to absorb whatever happens and the lack of leadership to show us the right way through where we all come out standing and adapting in new ways, optimistic about younger generations and how they are going to adapt to those things. And when they're the leaders at the very top, that right now is very profit driven, right? A CEO is financially obligated to shareholder value, not to clients, not to customers, and certainly not to employees. And I think that kind of goes to what you were saying is they're so disconnected from decision making. How do you see younger generations stepping into those leadership roles and really making changes for the better?
Yeah. And I can even relate what we're talking about to the very beginning of this, where we're saying there's a disconnect between what you're learning in the world, right? Like being good in academia and all this stuff doesn't correlate to business. And it's because of shareholder value and profits, right? They want you or whoever, whatever's in place to make the company thrive, which basically means you're either making more money, increasing revenue, or reducing costs in some way, right?
Right.
Um, and I mean, it's tough, right? Because in America, our economy and everything, like capitalism, all that, like we have so many things so good because of it. Obviously, there are bad sides, but we're able to do so many amazing things because of it. And it's also because if they keep performing well. So it's not easy.
But they're definitely not building loyalty and trust the way
Sure.
earlier generations did. And the younger generations can feel it. They don't put up with it. They're gone. They'll find somewhere else. I went to my older brother's retirement party from his employ where he retired after 43 years at the same place. And that's so rare these days. And it's because they haven't fostered that kind of low. They don't deserve it. The companies don't deserve it. It didn't used to be like this. It's beyond capitalism. We're very corporately owned as a country. And yes, we all want to make money, but not at the expense of the people. It's so top end loaded. And I read a study recently that talked about, there were two actually, one from Harvard and one from McKinney. And they were talking about that only about 25% of executives and leaders actually believe that their company strategic decision making is good. So these are executives and top leaders, and 80, 75, close to 80% of them don't think that they're making great decisions. And for me, that is about inclusiveness. They're not being included in the decisions that are made. They're made at such an upper level. How can we trickle those decision making down? How can we make that impact?
Yeah. And I think this is why it's important to understand there's other ways to make money also, right? I think what's tough about large corporations is they almost get like so big that they're this giant moving thing where I don't know if those sizes are really capable of making those trickle down all inclusive family good feel things. They're really good for I wouldn't say stability, but in terms of like compensation packages, big brand names. Like there are things you're going to get from those type of companies. And I wish I could say I have some ideas and solutions for those to have that. But what I do think is the solution is mid-sized companies, smaller companies, startup companies, your own company, right? Where you have a very core team that gets to drive everything and be part of everything. And I think that's one of the things I've loved about entrepreneurship. And the other thing, I think I want people, and especially young people, to think about sure, there's money and profits, but there's also impact that matters. And like, not every job you're going to be able to have both. But having enough money to do what you need to do and reach your goals is fine. And then focus on the impact side. Like it feels great to help other people at work succeed. It feels great to lift other women up. Like it feels great to be building a product that's helping people, even if you're not making the millions and millions of dollars. Because guess what? You might not even be happy once you have that much money. So there's more to work than money. And I think sometimes people forget that, including the companies. But they're held to a
I
different standard.
Well, they are, but I think when they make decisions in a vacuum, like we can't do that. You can't do it in your family. I can't do it in my family. And it I think that back in the day, maybe when the man ruled the household and the wife didn't work, that he made the decisions from the top down. And look, that couldn't sustain. That collapsed because it's not a sustainable model for anything. And so increasing inclusivity in decision making for me can often be about having the freedom to communicate, being free to ask the questions and raise the point if you're one of those senior leaders that this decision affects us negatively in this way. And I think there's a lack of openness in that communication on a corporate level. And in general, it's not like we've been encouraging critical thought for generations to come. It's, Henry Ford and Rockefeller. We want workers, not thinkers. We want workers that can stand in this place and operate this machine for 8 hours a day and not tell us a better way to do it because we don't want to know a better way to do it. And I'm optimistic that the younger generations just don't tolerate that very well. Being inspired by younger generations that you're using their voice in new ways and are comfortable in using them in new ways and stepping into their power, I find inspiring. And that communication is so important and including them. That's why mid-level companies are still so good at it because they don't think they know everything and they don't hammer it down and expect everybody just to absorb and endure it. They invite collaboration in. And so there's like a disconnect there for me that I am hopeful that your generation will be able to expand beyond that.
Well, you could think about it like, I don't know, like a sports team, a marriage. I mean, any team, if you have one person who's just telling everyone else what to do, you are missing the couple main elements of what is going to make the team work and actually get you the results you want, right? Like motivation is a huge one, right? Like if you
Yes.
could boss someone around, but if you're putting them in a corner, they're eventually going to pop or leave or, you know, things just work better with like unified vision and motivation.
I agree. And like all great conversations, ours is using up all of the time. I definitely want to take a moment and thank you for coming on the show and for modeling what early ambition can really look like if you're able to stand in that power and be clear. Your early work of self actualization and figuring out where you want to be and how you want to help people was so important to that. And I really appreciate you sharing it as candidly as you did. Also, I don't want to miss out. Please tell our audience how we can learn more about Advise Hub and about the other things you have going on.
Yeah. So, best social media would be LinkedIn. You can sign up for a LinkedIn newsletter. It also has the LinkedIn to the website, and it's Advise Hub. Also, our website is just www.advisehub.com. You'll find my information there, company information there, and also the free version. If you or your kids or whoever wants to go check it out, you can do it right now.
And if we have a leader, someone like me that wants to give you content for it, wants to participate and help the younger generation, how does that work?
Yep, you can go on the website, and then there's an area called Become an Advisor, and you can sign up right on the website. Or if you wanted to just shoot me an email and I could connect you with the team, it's Emily at advisehub.com.
Perfect. And I will link to all of those social media links and Emily's website in the show notes. So be sure and check those out. Leadership isn't about age. It's about self-awareness, as Emily said, and the courage to build what you wish existed when you were struggling. Deals with Heels is where female entrepreneurs grow through honest connection about power, identity, and impact. And if this conversation resonated with you, if it challenged how you think about ambition or authority, then my work lives on beyond this podcast. If you're interested in building better connections while growing your business, I have a free resource called the Human Sales Playbook, and I will link to it also in the show notes so you can download it for free. Thank you for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe and tell your friends. Thank you so much, Emily, for coming on as a guest. I'm certain that my audience is going to learn so much about your experiences.
Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, everyone.
Until next time, stand strong in your power, especially when it gets uncomfortable. See you next week.